everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kirsty and in today's video I'm going to be doing another do's and don'ts video, but today I'm going to be focusing on drawing lips. So here is the don'ts and the do version of the two lips that I'm drawing today, and I've also done other videos which are do's and don'ts videos, but I've done them on hair and also on eyes as well. So I'll link them at the top and in the description so that you can check them out if you want to. So I'm going to start off by talking about the don'ts version of the lips first. And the first thing that I see a lot of beginners do is they do their outline really dark, and they also don't spend enough time making sure that their sketch is accurate before they go in and do all the shading. And I also put really harsh lines around the upper and lower lips, when in reality there is only a very subtle change between the skin of the lips and the skin of the rest of the face. Another mistake that a lot of beginners make is that they go straight in doing those dark portions, and they do them really dark at the start, which makes it look very unnatural because you've not got an integrated shadow, it's more of just a line. The next common mistake that I'm showing is that a lot of people just fill in the rest of the lips and they don't really think about where the shadows are and where the highlights are. And this can lead to your lip drawing looking very flat because you've not tried to think about the 3D structure of the lips. The next mistake is when it comes to blending the pencil out, and a lot of people use their fingers to blend it out, and the problem with this is that when you blend with your fingers have a lot of grease and oil on them, and this will transfer onto the paper, meaning that your blending won't be as smooth, and it also means that your drawing won't be as archival. So the thing that's going to make your drawing look really realistic is having really subtle changes between the shadows and the highlights rather than harsh outlines around your different parts of the face, because if you look at your face there isn't outlines outlining each of the features, so make sure you don't put outlines around your drawings. So adding highlights to your drawing is really important to make it look three-dimensional and to help make it pop a bit, but a lot of beginners don't really think about where they're putting the highlights or the shape of the highlights, so they might just put highlights everywhere, or they might do this thing which a lot of people do, which is outline the whole of the mouth and just kind of create this halo of highlight around the whole of the lips, where in reality the bottom lip has a lot of shadow cast under it. And finally, the last mistake is when you're doing your strokes on your lips to create the creases, a lot of people just do them straight down and don't really think about the curvature of the lips and follow that. So now that I've talked about all the common beginner mistakes, I'm going to be going through the way that I draw lips, and I'm going to be giving you some alternative ways so that you can make your drawings look even more realistic. So again, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm going to draw out the sketch again, but this time I'm going to make sure that it's completely accurate to the reference photo before I go in and do all the shading. And so I'm using a B-grade pencil to do this sketch, and I'm doing it very lightly, unlike before where I went in and did some really harsh outlines. So you will see that I do a bit of erasing and then I redo some bits, but that's because I want to make sure that the sketch is completely accurate before I just go in and do all the shading and all that sort of stuff. So to do this drawing I am going to be using just 3 types of pencils, and it doesn't really matter what pencils you have, there's no particular pencils that you need to have to do this, but I am using the Derwent Graphite drawing pencils, and I'm using grades B and 4B, and then I'm also using a hard charcoal pencil from Generals, which I'm going to use to do the really dark portions because it means that I can get them really dark but I don't get a lot of shine. So now what I just did was I did mark in the dark portions of the lips, so the crease in between the two of the lips, and also I added some shadow at the bottom lip. But the difference here was that I didn't do it really dark and I didn't do it in a harsh line. Now I'm going back in with that B-grade pencil, and I'm using this to lightly shade in the rest of the mouth. But as you can see, I'm leaving certain areas without any pencil on, and this is the highlight portions of the lips. And I'm leaving them light so that I don't get much graphite on them, which means that once I've blended it out, I can see where those highlights are, so it's easy to erase them and see where the shadows and the highlights are. I'm building up the graphite in layers, so it doesn't have to just be done in one layer. I'm building up the layers and adding more shadow as I go. And it's important to add really light layers because this also helps to avoid getting shine in the end. As you can see, when I'm doing my pencil strokes, I am not just doing them in a whole line. I'm using the motion and the direction that the lips would curve in to help get a three-dimensional look. And as you can see, the more I'm adding this pencil, the less you can see just an outline around the lips. And this is because I'm making sure that when I add my pencil, it is the same grade and value as those lines that I drew, so they just transition into each other really nicely. I am now going in with the 4B pencil and I'm using this to add in the shadows. So I'm looking at my reference photo and I'm just marking in where the shadowed regions are. I'm not adding a lot of detail at the moment because I'll do that once I've blended it out. At the moment, I'm just trying to identify the structure, so the shadowed areas and the highlighted areas. And I'm also adding a bit of graphite around the rest of the skin around the face. So every mouth will be slightly different, but there are general rules. So there tends to be a shadow at the bottom of the lower lip, but it does depend where your light source is coming from. So just make sure that you're really looking at your reference photo and mark out the shadows and the highlights before you go in shades, so that you know where the shadows need to be and where the highlights need to be, so where you don't need to apply any graphite. As you can see, I'm doing this really slowly, and this drawing took me a lot longer than it did with the other one. And this is because I'm building up the layers slowly and not rushing it. I'm taking my time and I'm doing it in little circular motions and in certain directions so that I don't get lots of grainy look. So when I blend it out, it will be really smooth. So once I finish adding all the layers, I'm going to be going in to blend it out, and I'm not going to be using my finger this time. Instead, I'm going to be using a cotton bud to blend the lips, and I'm also going to be using tissue to blend out the rest of the skin. And these are both really good things that you can use to blend out graphite, and it gives you a really smooth look, and it also helps you gain control and doesn't mean that you're going to get grease over your paper. And as you can see, it's given a really smooth look, and it does spread the graphite all over those highlighted areas that you've done, but because you didn't apply graphite at the start, you can still see where the highlighted areas are meant to be, so you haven't lost them. So once I've blended this out, I'm going to go back in and add another layer, and this time I'm going to go back in with that charcoal pencil and deepen up that center line. And it is okay to go really dark with the pencil, but I do like to build up in layers. One thing also that I'm going to mention is that when you use charcoal and graphite together, charcoal won't go over the top of graphite. So when you want to add charcoal to a specific area, just make sure you're using charcoal on that area. So if you're trying to add charcoal over the top of the graphite, then it won't really work. So make sure when you've done your sketch, when you go and apply the charcoal, that you erase all the graphite there so that the charcoal will stick to the paper. But it is okay to add graphite over the top of the charcoal, just not the other way around. I'm also using that charcoal pencil to mark in some of the details, so some of the creases, and also to help integrate that center line into the rest of the skin so that it doesn't just look like a harsh line. And like I said, realism is all about subtle transitions and subtle shading. You don't want to see any harsh lines because your face doesn't have any harsh lines. So make sure that it's all just subtle transitions between the different values of the graphite. And all the time that I'm doing this, I'm not applying hardly any pressure at all. Again, once I added in that charcoal, I went back in with that same cotton bud and I just blended out that area. And because I'm not damaging the paper by pressing too hard, it means that I can keep layering and building up the darkness. So I don't have to go dark straight away because I know I can add more dark on the top if I need to. Whereas if you add too much dark, it can be really hard to erase it and make it look smooth again. Another thing to mention is that when I did the don't drawing, I did the lips very similar shapes and sizes, whereas in reality the bottom lower lip tends to be a bit thicker than the upper lip, and also the upper lip has a bit more shadow on it than the lower lip does, because the lower lip sticks out a bit more, so more of the light hits it. So it's important that you look at your reference photo and identify these things. So again, I blended it out and I'm adding another layer. And I will do this a few more times until I get the look that I desire. But again, I'm in no rush. When you're doing realism, it's not something that you can rush because it's all about really soft transitions. So if you want to do realism, make sure that you're prepared to spend a bit more time making sure that your work looks really soft and really subtle. And as you saw, I really tried to blend in that upper lip to the rest of the skin so that you can see that the lip is darker, but you can't just see a line of where it exactly transitions off into the skin. And as you can see already, just by establishing the different shadows and highlights and not adding too much detail even at the moment, it still looks really realistic, and you can identify that it's a mouth and that the lips, and you can see that they look more three-dimensional than before. Now I'm going in with the 4B pencil and I'm adding in the individual creases, and when I'm doing this I'm following the curvature that the lips are going in, and this will also help to give it more of a three-dimensional look because you're giving it more motion and you're showing us the direction of the lips. I'm also using the B pencil as well to go over those creases and to help transition them into the rest of the lips, because again, we don't want them to look harsh, we don't want them to just look like lines on the lips, we want them to look like creases. Now trying to blend that center line into the lips even more, and I'm also starting to build up shadow on the bottom of the lower lip. And there was a lot of shadow under the whole of the lower lip, whereas the top lip, above it, there was a lot of light, so it wasn't as dark, the skin around it. Another thing to mention is the Cupid's bow. So with the Cupid's bow before, I just did a really harsh line on the Cupid's bow, which doesn't make it look realistic. So the Cupid's bow is just a slight dip in the skin, so you've got to make it look like an indentation in the skin. And to do this, the middle part will have shadow, but above the top lip you will have a little bit of highlights, and the highlight will go up around the sides of the Cupid's bow as well. And that's important to make it look like it's indented into the skin and to make it look like the upper lip is further forward than that Cupid's bow. So now I'm just going in and perfecting everything before I go in and add all of the highlights. And the highlights are just the thing at the end which really makes it pop and brings everything together. So now I'm going in and I'm adding all the highlights, and to do this I am using a bit of a razor which I chopped off using a little craft knife to make a sharp point. And when I'm doing the highlights, again I'm really making sure that I'm doing them with the curvature of the lips to add more three-dimension. I'm also using some blue tack to lighten up certain areas where I want them to be slightly lighter, but I don't want them to be really bright. And it was really important for me to look at the reference photo and make sure that I'm not just putting highlights everywhere for the sake of it, that I'm really just putting them where they need to be. Now I'm going in on top of the upper lip and I'm adding a slight bit of highlight. So on the top lip there was highlight around the lips, but it's not really harsh, so I'm not just going to do a harsh line. I'm going to try and integrate it into those two areas so that it doesn't look so harsh. But on the bottom lip there wasn't a highlight. There was a bit of highlight at the bottom of the lower lip, but not underneath it. And I will go in with a cotton bud to glaze over these highlights a bit more to add some variety, because not every highlight was really harsh. Some highlights are just slight bits of lightness to the skin, where it's lighter than the areas next to it, and then there are really harsh highlights. So it's important to get that variety and not make every highlight uniform and the same value. And that's basically it for this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned some new things. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you check out the other two do's and don'ts video for drawing hair and also eyes, and let me know what you guys think of this and if you have any other tips on how to draw lips. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to my channel and you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on my other tutorial videos that I have every single week. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!